know when you get to go to the beach. Oh, well, hello. I apologize, you caught Molly and I packing. We're going... Molly? Molly? Molly! Well, apparently Molly is not packing. She's taking a nap at the back of the church, but that's okay. I don't mind packing for both of us. Well, don't want to forget this one. Let me just clear off my chair from Molly's toys, and I'll take a seat for a moment. Oh, well, as I said, Puppy Pastor Molly and I are packing because we're going out of town this week. We are attending a week-long Drum Circle Facilitators Play Shop hosted by the amazing Arthur Hall and Village Music Circles. Well, we'll be back next week and back to our regular YouTube worship experience. I'm Pastor Lyda, and thank you for tuning in to Westchester United Methodist Church's YouTube channel. Well, anyway, so as I shared, I'm heading off to drum camp. And I'm excited, but I've also been a little bit nervous. I'm heading off to a place that I've never been before. I'm going to be meeting a lot of new people and learning new things. And I've also been wondering, as I sometimes do, will I end up being the most embarrassing person there? Will I have anything to bring to the table, to offer to this amazing group of musicians I'm going to meet up with? Will Molly and I be invited to sit at the cool drummers table for dinner, or will we instead take our drums and our plates of food and sit outside? That's kind of silly, right? The things we think of. But it also made me think about a story that Jesus told in the Gospel of Luke about being invited to a cool kids Pharisee dinner party. It's from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, verses 1 and 7 through 14. And it goes like this. One Sabbath, while Jesus went to share a meal in the home of one of the leaders of the Pharisees, they were watching him closely. When Jesus noticed how the guests sought out the best seats at the table, he told them a parable. When someone invites you to a wedding, don't take your seat at a place of honor. Someone more highly regarded than you could have been invited by your host. The host who invited both of you will come to you and say, "Give your seat to this other person." Embarrassed, you will take your seat in the least important place. Instead, when you receive an invitation, go and sit in the least important place. When your host approaches you, he will say, "Friend, move up to a better seat." Then you will be honored in the presence of your fellow guests. All who lift themselves up will be brought low, and all those who make themselves low will be lifted up. Then Jesus said to the person who had invited him, "When you host a lunch or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers and sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they will invite you in return, and there will be your reward. Instead, when you give a banquet, invite the poor, crippled, lame, and blind, and you will be blessed because they can't repay you. Instead, you will be repaid when the just are resurrected." This advice that Jesus gives on where to sit at the dinner table, it reminds me of sitting at the kids' table when your family had big gatherings like Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's the time when the kids were separated out from the grown-ups at feeding time, right? I also remember, however, not really wanting to sit at the kids' table. I wanted to sit at the grown-up table. I knew that was the place to be, where the silverware was real and the glasses weren't plastic. I remember sitting at the kids' table. At one house we lived in, we had a little round table with wooden chairs that was in the garage. And that's where the kids sat, in the garage. I also remember dumping an entire bottle of wishbone salad dressing all over the place because that stuff really travels when you shake it really, really hard and the cap is not on. And I also remember that I never finished a meal without dumping my beverage at least once all over the place. Well, now that I'm a parent and have spent many years mopping up after the kids when they were young, perhaps my parents did have the right idea in keeping me in the garage at all family functions, even when we weren't eating. But that's another story. But being able to sit up at the grown-up table, it's not that the food was different or the atmosphere was different, except that the place settings were breakable. It was the prestige. It was the status of being at the big table. Being invited to sit at the cool grown-up table meant that you had made it to the big time, and you were grown up enough to sit there. I wonder if that longing to be considered a grown-up sitting at a cool table ever ends. I wonder if we are continually looking for ways to sit at the cool people's table of life, to be recognized as having something valuable to say or to contribute, to be welcomed at the big table so that the whole world knows that we are valued, that we are important. Jesus was no stranger to the human need for praise and recognition, this hunger to always be seated at the cool grown-up table. So Jesus has been invited to a dinner party at the home of a Pharisee, a cool kid, an important guy with influence and power. As Jesus watches the guests arrive, he notices how they jostle and maneuver so that they can sit closer to the head of the table, where the seats are filled with all of the important people. The advice that Jesus offers does not at first seem to be as theological as it is practical. Don't race to seat at the head of the table. Humble yourselves and sit at the foot. If you invite yourself up to the important seats, there is always the chance that someone more important than you will show up, and you will be humiliated when the host asks you to move over and to make room for a more favored guest. But if you sit at the foot of the table, the worst thing that can happen is that you will have to remain at the foot of the table for the rest of the meal. But there is always that chance that those at the head of the table will be asked to make room for you, and you get bumped up to the cool people seats. Then he offers them a little advice from Proverbs. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Jesus adds that when we throw a party, our soul would be better served by inviting the poor and the disadvantaged. If we simply invite our friends or the people we think can do things for us, then they will invite us to their parties and we will be repaid. But if we invite those who cannot repay us, we are embracing God's kingdom life where the tables are turned. The very people Jesus tells us are important, the ones that we should hang out with, reach out to, share meals with, are often the same people we would rather not invite to our table. The broken, the poor, the immigrant, the marginalized, the oppressed, those who are not considered cool. These are the people whom Jesus welcomed and loved. These are the people we should welcome and love. And sometimes these people are us. But getting back to the dinner party in today's story, I invite you to imagine that scene at the Pharisees' table happening today. So we're at a posh gala event, lots of movers and shakers present, and the guest of honor, Jesus, offers a bit of advice about where to sit and who to welcome, and then repeats a proverb about those who are exalted being humbled, and those who are humbled being exalted. I imagine that the room grows silent. There is a pause while Jesus' words sink in. And then there is a massive rush to the foot of the table as the guests are crushing themselves to get to the foot of the table. Because in today's culture, if the way to be first is to be last, then we're going to be the leastest and the lastest than anybody else has ever been. Jesus has taken an entire status system of his culture and, sadly, our culture, and not only turns it upside down, but he shakes it up, and then he throws it away. When we live our lives in God's kingdom right here and right now, there is no such thing as humble and no such thing as exalted, no first, no last, no high, no low, no head of the table, no kids' table. We are all together, loved, sitting on God's knee, with God's grace flowing as freely as wishbone salad dressing. For those of us who do finally get to sit at the adult table on holidays, was it all that we had thought it would be? As I tell my kids, being an adult isn't all that it's cracked up to be. The adult table can be a boring place to sit. You have to remember rules and requirements which were not only unnecessary but not welcome when you sat at the kids' table. I imagine that God's table looks a lot like a drum circle. There's a space to enter, and at God's circular table drum circle, we are all equal, sitting in concentric circles so that we are all seen and heard. Each drum beat, each phrase of music that is unique to each one of us moves through the music that we make together. No one part more important than another, but seamlessly moving from the melody to the harmony and back again, from loud to soft, easily and organically as the music calls. Not worried about whose drum is the biggest, or whether the claves are more important than the shakers. Seeing each other with affirmation and recognition, each adding to the worth and to the beauty of the music. This, Jesus reminds us, is what we are here for: to invite, to affirm, to love those who think they are not invited, think that they may never be able to return the invitation. As the circle just grows wider and wider, and the music, well, it's heavenly. Well, it's time for me to continue packing all Molly's toys and our drums and set off on our new adventure. Speaking of drums, I don't want to forget Molly's. Here's Molly's drum. Well, I wish you all a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again as Molly and I head off to another exciting adventure to a drum circle. Well, everyone, happy drumming!